Good afternoon, my name is Niall O'Brien and welcome to the PE Lead Network meeting on behalf of North Yorkshire Sport. It's the 29th of November 2023. Just wanted to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. So yes, I'm Niall, I'm the latest newest recruit at North Yorkshire Sport and I am the Education Manager. Just wanted to share a little bit of information before we get into this afternoon's session on my kind of experience and background. So I've been in and around physical education in primary schools for the last 15 years, specialising in PE and outdoor learning, more recently physical activity in the broadest sense. I've recent experience in an Ofsted deep dive in PE and have a relatively strong track record in using PE to support school wider outcomes in terms of inspection reports. I've recently supported the DfE in light touch work on their PE and Sports Premium guidance, which was updated ready for this academic year, and I work closely as one of the Creating Active Schools locality leads, and I'm part of the national team supporting that piece of work around physical activity in schools. I've done some recent pieces of work with PGCE students, a bit of guest lecturing regarding physical education in primary schools, and I'm a parent governor for my children's school. You can see all three of my children there, they're a little bit more grown up now. Shay is 11, no he's not, he's 12, don't know why I said that. Frankie is 9 and Rory on my back, he's now 4, so this picture needs updating, I would suggest. I wanted to start with a quick task, just because we're going to be discussing physical literacy in a little bit. I'm not expecting anybody to have, a huge amount of knowledge on this. You might have, which would be great. If we could all just scan the barcode that will take us through to a Padlet. If you're not familiar with Padlet, it's just an online tool to collect people's thoughts, and it's a little bit less awkward than going into breakout rooms. So if we could just spend a minute or two scanning the barcode and just responding to the question on the Padlet, and that will give me some really good things to think about moving forward. Thank you for taking part in the Padlet task. I'll look at those responses a little bit later, but hopefully it'll build into this session as we move through the slides. In terms of this afternoon's agenda, I've already gone through the introductions. It's important to mention that my colleague has supported this session, Georgina, who's responsible for school games from Harrogate's perspective, as well as her children and young people role as well. We'll look at some North Yorkshire Sport updates more broadly. There'll be another Padlet task, only very quick. We'll talk about the PE and Sports Premium, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call are familiar with, some people not so much, so we'll base it around people not having a huge amount of knowledge in that area. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the recent Ofsted report, levelling the playing field, looking at what primary physical education looks like nationally, strengths and weaknesses. Then we'll talk about physical literacy and the recently launched consensus statement, which will hopefully tie in with our Padlet from earlier on our understanding around physical literacy. There'll be a school games update in relation to what's expected from a school games organiser nationally, but from a local perspective as well. And then finally another Padlet just to gather everybody's perspectives, everybody's needs and wants for our next network session, and we'll finish with the up and coming CPD opportunities. Let's see how quick we get through this agenda. We might be away for an early finish. So just to build a bit of a picture on what's happening nationally in terms of activity levels amongst our children, young people, and a little bit on adults also. Sport England's Active Life Survey suggests that 47% of children and 63% of adults only are meeting the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines for physical activity. We know that 30% of children and 26% of adults do less than 30 minutes of activity every day, and there is also significant inequalities regarding a person's ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic background and age, which all impacts how likely they are to be physically active. On to the updates regarding the primary PE and Sports Premium for 23-24. there is a new reporting template. You can often see that the colour of the background changes. This year there are some subtle adjustments, some changes that we will be sharing in a moment. The template has to be completed as it does every year by the 31st of July. There has been slight changes with the DfE hoping to reduce workload for teaching staff. The 5 key indicators continue to be in place, although there's been a bit of subtle adjustment in terms of which order they're in. And the guidance document must be used alongside the reporting template to ensure the spend is fit for purpose and sustainable. Looking at the spend against the key indicators and how you can achieve this, CPD is seen as a priority now, and we'll talk about that in a moment in terms of where it's positioned as a key indicator amongst the 5 key indicators. PE, sport and physical activity including swimming, should be considered within your CPD offer. Schools should monitor and assess the effectiveness of the CPD being provided to make sure it's fit for purpose. We should be looking at embedding physical activity into the school day through encouraging active travel, physical active learning and active break times. They're just some examples of how that can be achieved. We should be looking at providing targeted activities to support or involve the least active children. And now we need to be looking at equal access for all pupils in terms of school sport and physical activities that the school provides. It's important that the PE and Sports Premium grant is used effectively and it's based upon the needs of the school. Schools must use the funding to create additional and sustainable improvements beyond what they've already been embedding. This means that schools should use the PE and Sports Premium to build capability and capacity within the school. So that could be looking at developing support staff, teaching staff and lunchtime staff that offer provision during non-curriculum time. Head teachers and governors alongside trustees, they should be well informed in terms of what's expected from the PE and Sports Premium and have a good understanding of the key performance indicators to ensure that there is a legacy of the funding within school. The premium should be used to consider the Chief Medical Officer's guidance on 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. 30 of that needs to be achieved during school and 30 outside of school. The PE premium should not be used for capital spend projects. So we often talk about anything that is fixed to the ground or fixed to a wall. The building of any construction, outdoor learning areas will not be considered as a reasonable spend of the funding. The updated guidance highlights schools should prioritise spending the PE premium to make improvements alongside the 5 key areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hit all 5 key indicators. Again, we go back to that point of it's based upon the school's needs. So if you look at your funding and you're only meeting key performance indicator 2, but that's aligned with your school needs, that's absolutely fine. If you want to try and achieve sort of a piece of work that covers all 5, then that's great, but there's no pressure, no school is obliged to do so. The key indicators remain largely the same. I've highlighted in red key indicator 1, increase confidence, knowledge and skills of all staff teaching PE and sport. I think that's a gentle nudge in terms of DfE expecting schools to look at developing CPD opportunities for school staff and prioritising that. It might be the case that your school's done that last year, therefore it doesn't necessarily need to be a focus for this academic year, but there could be opportunities for ongoing CPD. Key indicator 2, increase engagement of all pupils in regular physical activity. Number 3, the profile of PE and sport being raised as a tool for whole school improvement. 4, broader and more equal experience of a range of sport and physical activities offered to all pupils. And it's interesting there, the word equal sticks out to me. Equal experience. Equal experience has been kind of popping up in terms of terminology in more recent reports, again, that we can touch on a little bit later in this session. And finally, key indicator 5, increased participation in competitive sport. So yeah, the CPD is encouraged to be prioritised, but schools can decide on whether that's appropriate or not. Moving on to swimming. Schools must publish the percentage of pupils within its Year 6 cohort for this academic year who met the national curriculum swimming and water safety requirements. I know this is a challenge because often during my time in education, in primary education, it would be usually Year 4, potentially Year 3 swimming. So, you know, keeping the data for the next sort of 2 or 3 years can be a little bit of a challenge. I would suggest obviously you'll be keeping data from that Year 4 cohort or whichever year you have selected to attend swimming, and just look to use that data in the coming years. I've seen examples of schools not necessarily publish Year 6 data because they mightn't have it, and just make a note within their PE and Sports Premium reporting document regarding current swimming progress with the cohort that is currently attending swimming. Yeah, I've said you can use data from previous years, depending on who's the PE lead. Often that piece of information may have been lost somewhere in translation between people moving on from school to school, but do try your best to keep that information within your PE records. Schools cannot fund swimming lessons from its PE and Sports Premium. This has been something that I have looked into over the past couple of years, and some schools, not necessarily deliberately, have used a portion of their premium to fund core curriculum swimming lessons. This is not acceptable. Additional top-up lessons for children that have not met the requirement or targeted children, that is absolutely fine, but it cannot be used for core swimming lessons that are linked to curriculum PE. Here we have a significant update in regards to a pilot of a digital reporting tool. So currently we're using a document that we will populate over time, sort of a working document that is the PE and Sports Premium. There will be a digital reporting tool that is going to be piloted. We're waiting to hear from DfE in terms of what this will look like. We're looking at it being a mandatory requirement sometime next year, June to July, and schools will complete this online. Again, we'll be receiving more details on this shortly. Hopefully it's been a consideration around sort of teacher workload and work-life balance in regards to it not being an onerous task, but more of an instant sort of database of schools gathering the information that they'd normally publish at the end of the year. So hopefully that'll be a piece of work that's well received amongst primary school teachers. I would certainly be looking at this document I'm about to share. So we're talking about non-compliant spending of the premium funding. There are restrictions in terms of what schools are allowed to use the funding for. Regarding compliancy, there is a document with some good guidance. This has been updated, and it'll give you examples of what schools should not be spending the money on in relation to those key indicators and the funding more broadly. And it has just been introduced that if the DfE have any concerns regarding discrepancies on how the funding's been used, they will have the power, the capacity to recover some of the funding, if not all of the funding. And I have heard about this previously through our network, that there could be some random sampling of schools moving forward. So it's important that we're following that guidance the best we can and as honestly as we can. Thank you for staying with me on this. I know there's an awful lot of information, some of it's a bit dry. I can send this document over anyway, but just so we know the key takeaways. So in terms of a bit of a summary, school swimming, top-up swimming lessons can only be funded by the PE and Sports Premium. We need to look at decision making, consulting head teachers, governors and trustees in regards to plans for spending. The use of coaches in school cannot be used to cover PPA time. That should be, we should have solid understanding of that across the primary workforce, because that's been in place for some time now. All year groups should benefit from the funding. The funding is calculated based on the number of children in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. However, our children in early years should absolutely be benefiting from the funding, whether that's in the future or direct provision resources, CPD support within that early years kind of unit within your schools. There is no carryover of funding, so I should repeat that. No carryover of funding. Anything left in terms of underspend for this academic year cannot be cannot be carried over to next academic year. So I would encourage you to utilise that funding to the last penny this academic year. Here I'd like to take you through some of the key themes that have been drawn from a recent report produced by Ofsted at the back end of September this year. It's called Levelling the Playing Field, looking at physical education across primary schools nationally. These are the 5 sort of themes that have been drawn out of the report, and it's important to mention at this stage that this report used a sample size of 50 primary schools across England. So it's interesting. It's interesting to look at the quality of the results from any surveys or feedback from schools. Number 1, in terms of themes, more schools schedule enough time to teach PE, but lessons do not always meet leaders' expectations. Number 2, many schools do not match the ambition of the national curriculum with regards to the breadth of activities across that curriculum design. Number 3, excuse me, where the curriculum is stronger, schools prioritise the most appropriate physical activities. And reading between the lines, I think this is making reference to curriculums just being designed in the most traditional sense, looking at traditional sporting activities rather than activities that meet the needs of children. Excuse me. And there's nothing wrong with driving your curriculum through sport, but we certainly need to make sure that it's meeting the needs of children and those activities are age and stage appropriate. Number 4 would be teachers requiring more support to understand how to assess and to use their judgments to inform future teaching. It's a really tricky expectation, I believe, through many years of trying to put together a fit for purpose assessment strategy. But again, we can talk about that in future network sessions. I've done a piece of work on that may be worth sharing, that links to something we'll talk about further along in this session. And then finally, number 5, the report recommends that lessons focus on competencies. And competencies vocabulary that comes up regularly in the PE, school sport and physical activity realms in primary schools. And again, we're going to talk about that in the upcoming slide. And we need to make sure that staff are well trained, and that links to the PE premium key indicators, particularly number 1 in terms of developing support staff and teaching staff. To touch more sort of deeply on that 5th strand of the Levelling the Playing Field report, I mentioned about competency. So here's a little piece of work produced by Hannah Miller, the Ofsted PE lead inspector, that talks about what it is to be competent according to Ofsted anyway. So there's sort of 3 pillars that Ofsted will kind of look at with regards to development of pupils within physical education in the primary setting. So we've got motor competence, which is essentially pupils having the opportunity to receive careful feedback and instruction and lots of opportunity to practice. The second pillar is rules, strategies and tactics. So their movement needs to be informed, and this can be achieved by applying the skills or learning how to apply the skills for different varied activities, and having a knowledge of strategies, for example, manipulating your technique in a scenario to outwit an opponent. That's just one broad example. And the third pillar, healthy participation. So how to take part in PE, sport and physical activity in a safe manner, how to prepare properly in terms of warm-ups and keeping your body safe and fit, ready to participate, how to recover from an activity, and then looking at behaviours and that affective domain in terms of how to motivate yourself to participate at your absolute best level with the highest levels of motivation possible. I just wanted to shine the light on my own findings from the report in terms of the key themes I think are worth sharing with you guys beyond what Ofsted have already highlighted. So I looked at fundamental movement skills, and I think this is crucial to make sure that our very youngest pupils are getting the absolute best experiences of early movement, lots of opportunity to practice and revisit those 3 key areas of fundamental movement, so object control, stability and locomotion. Moving on to assessment, a real challenge for primary teachers. Physical education assessment is something that I've been looking at and working on for such a long time. It's very difficult to get right, but I do believe that we can. And if we're speaking kind of in Ofsted language terminology, we need to be looking at our assessment sort of procedures with regards to pupils' procedural and declarative knowledge. And in simple terms, that's showing how the children know what to do and how to do it. And I've got a piece of work on that I'd be more than happy to share, in future sessions, or it could be discussed in the Padlet a little bit later. And then extracurricular provision. Is your extracurricular provision truly broad and balanced? Who's designed it? Has it been co-designed in terms of pupil need, or has it just been put in place as an offer completely designed by the adults in your school? Because it can't be truly broad and balanced if children have not had a say in what they would like to do as part of their extracurricular provision. And then finally, how does the Levelling the Playing Field report link to the recently launched Physical Literacy Consensus Statement? We'll talk about that next. So I'm going to talk about the newly launched Physical Literacy Consensus Statement for England in partnership with Sport England, funded by the National Lottery. We've sort of briefly, light touch, discussed our understanding of physical literacy, and mine has changed somewhat, so that certainly wasn't a trick question earlier. My understanding of physical literacy had always been linked predominantly to early movement in the early years, fundamental movement skills, physical development, that sort of realm. Now, this physical literacy consensus statement has been put in place to support different partners within the sector, education, community settings, anybody involved in health and physical activity, to talk about how physical literacy is going to underpin all the work we're doing to support physical activity across the life course, right from the early years up until we're much older and frail. So what is it? The Physical Literacy Consensus Statement helps us to understand our relationship with sport and physical activity, and I've highlighted some sort of key terminology in red just to really hit home the messages. And it's over our lifetime, it's based on our experiences and the opportunities that we've received. How was it developed? 50 organisations, including sport, health, academia, education and community partners, came together to sort of draw upon their perspectives of physical literacy. And finally, why is it important? Understanding what impacts people's relationships regarding movement and physical activity throughout their life. It will enable us as a sector to ensure all our offers are as appealing as possible, to make sure we're getting as many people active as possible. In our world, obviously, we're talking about primary age children and children within early years settings. So I'm not going to go through each aspect because this is a fairly text heavy document, but in terms of the Physical Literacy Consensus Statement key themes, there are 5, and again I've underlined key terminology just to really continue to drill down into what it is we're trying to achieve regarding the statement and how we want to embed it within our work, anything related to physical activity, sport and PE. So I'll go through the sort of sub-themes. Understanding physical literacy, why physical literacy matters, supporting physical literacy, our experiences affect our physical literacy, and physical literacy is personal. So again, just to quickly sort of touch on that language, our relationship with physical activity is ever changing. It's influenced by the choices that we have and our meaningful relationships that we associate with physical activity. It's how we move, connect and feel during movement, and it's by doing activities that we enjoy and find meaningful. It's about the people that we interact with and the communities that we are part of, and that everybody has their own strengths, needs and circumstances. Our own relationship is very much unique over our own lifetime, and we want to make sure that we're providing experiences that ensure our children continue their journey of physical activity or physical literacy right up until adulthood and beyond. To wrap up this piece on physical literacy, this is a graphic that I'm sure you will come across within your sort of PE and sport networks, and there are sort of three colour-coded statements, if you like, just to remind us what physical literacy is and the outcomes and the themes within that. So we've got physical literacy is our relationship with movement and physical activity throughout time, a personal relationship that's positive and meaningful. Movement and physical activity is how we move, think and feel, and we're looking at those sort of domains: physical, social, cognitive and even affective domains that can be developed within physical education. And it's our relationship with activity throughout life, which is influenced across the life course through our social connections and our environmental sort of experiences. Our school games coordinator for Harrogate and her more broader work in terms of North Yorkshire, things are going to look slightly different with regards to how experiences are offered. Yes, there'll be still traditional competition, but there's going to be a little bit of a shift, or a significant shift would be a fair description, because we are really working hard, both Georgina and I, to make sure that our school games offer across North Yorkshire and in Harrogate also is really linking closely to those three key themes: tackling inequalities, making sure we reach the children who need the support the most, youth engagement, making sure children are involved in the co-design of what we are offering, and physical literacy of creating positive experiences, whether that be competition or experiencing new sports or trying out new activities that are either non-competitive or individual based activities. That's sort of the route, the angle or the golden thread that's going to run through all our work to do with school games. Yeah, so about to wrap up the session almost, just to discuss our CPD opportunities and resources to support physical education, school sport and physical activity across North Yorkshire. We've been working really hard in the background to sort of reset and realign our work on delivering professional development qualifications. So in the new year, we are going to be hopefully in a position to be offering the level 4 supporting pupils wellbeing through PE course. Again, that will be hopefully early in the new year. Alongside this, but perhaps a little bit later on in the year, will be the level 5 and level 6 primary school PE specialism and subject leadership training. Obviously that's a much more significant sort of training course than the level 4. The level 4 is still high quality, however the level 5 and 6 will demand more time dedicated to it, but we can share more details on that if requested, if interested. And finally, we've recently been taking part in a piece of work at North Yorkshire Sport. Our other colleague Jane absolutely has put a huge amount of work and effort into developing a train the trainer programme to support early years settings, not just schools, private settings also, to develop physical development in the early years, linking very closely to the early years framework. So that's a really exciting piece of work that is about to also kick off potentially now in the new year. If these three courses or opportunities are something that you are interested in, please be sure to either add them into the Padlet or send us a direct message. And yeah, we'll respond to you and give you more details on the upcoming opportunities within the new year. Almost there, second to last slide. Yeah, another Padlet. Again, this is just to kind of populate ideas, interest in what our next network meeting will consider. Again, these sessions should be in place to support the needs of teaching staff who are their PE leads within their respective schools. So I want to make sure that the next session is tailored to that, and we are looking at all the things that you're asking for. So if you could have a quick scan of this barcode, the final Padlet of the session, and populate that sort of response. It can be more than one response. That'd be really useful, and it'll help Georgina and I formulate a plan for the next session. And if you could spend a few minutes on that, well, I say a few minutes, a couple of minutes, that would be really well received. Thank you very much.